Hi you guys, welcome back to my kitchen. It is Saturday and I am going to try and get a little bit of preserving done today. It's already 11, so I'm not sure all that I'm going to get to, but I do know that we're going to start out with some pizza sauce. This is my favorite recipe. I've shared this here before on my channel, and I'll, as always, have the full recipe in the description box down below. But I'm planning to do a little bit of a smaller batch today. I just don't have quite enough tomatoes to do a full batch, and we need to restock our shelves with a little bit. So that's what I'm gonna get started on, and then we're just gonna kind of go from there and see what I can fit in today. So I've got to get these all washed up and prepped. I'm doing just a mix of a ton of different varieties. I've got lots of paste tomatoes, I've got some brandywines, lots of cherries, and I think I'm going to be doing about a half batch of my original pizza sauce recipe today. So I've got my tomatoes all washed up and ready to go. To start out with the pizza sauce, I like to saute the onion and garlic in a little bit of olive oil. So since I'm doing this all in one pot, I'm going to do that first before I get to chopping my tomatoes. Now, for my tomatoes, I'm leaving the skins on today. It's generally recommended to remove the skins, and that is what I typically do if I have frozen the tomatoes first. It makes it super easy to peel off the skins. They fall right off, and you lose some of the liquid, which means that the sauce cooks down a little bit quicker. But since I'm using fresh tomatoes today, I am just gonna leave the skins on. So I've got this heating over medium-low heat, and since I'm doing a half batch, I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of olive oil and then a cup and a half of chopped onion and a few garlic cloves. That's just going to saute for a few minutes, and then I'm going to get to chopping the tomatoes. So this recipe is based off the Ball Canning seasoned tomato sauce, and any of the adjustments that I've made to it are considered safe adjustments for a tested recipe. So if that is something that matters to you, this is a safe recipe for canning. Now, the only thing that I'm doing differently is leaving the tomato skins on. I feel comfortable with that, but if you don't, you can always just remove them. So I'm coring these and then roughly chopping. They don't need to be perfect because everything's going to get blended anyway. And all of these tomatoes aren't going to fit into my pot right off the bat. At least I don't think they will. So what I'll do is I'll get them all chopped up, and as the sauce cooks down a little bit, I will just keep adding more tomatoes in. Now, surprisingly, I was able to get all of those tomatoes in there, so I'm going to add in all of my seasonings. I'm doing some dried basil, dried oregano, some dried thyme, black pepper, some salt, chili flakes. We like to do quite a bit of these. I also like to add in some garlic powder for a little bit more garlic flavor, and I am using some of my garlic skate powder that I made last year. And then I also do just a little bit of brown sugar. I'm going to start this out over medium-low heat. I'll stir this just a little bit, and we'll continue to stir it as it begins to cook down. While those tomatoes are cooking down, I'm going to deal with some green beans. I pulled a bunch from the garden, and my plan with these is just to freeze more. We still have lots in the pantry canned, so I'm going to do some frozen today. And this is going to be a great thing to have for stir fries, soups. The canned green beans we will typically use more for a side dish for a dinner. So this has been simmering for a couple hours at this point. It's reduced down quite a bit. The tomatoes are nice and soft, so I'm gonna go in with an immersion blender and then see where we're at for thickness, and we'll probably have to cook it down a little longer. All right, this definitely needs more time. It's a little too thin for pizza sauce. And even if it was close to that point, I want to cook it a little bit longer, just so any of the air bubbles that are created with blending it with the immersion blender can dissipate a bit. So I'm going to leave this, work on something else while we're waiting for it, and then we'll get it into some jars. My pizza sauce is nice and thick, so I'm gonna get this jarred up. Now, I'm canning in 1/2 pint size jars. I find that that's a great size for us. We can get 2 pizzas out of that, but if you have a larger family or just want to can it in a larger size jar, you could also can this in pint size jars. So I am going to be adding bottled lemon juice to this. You could do citric acid instead if you prefer. And for a 1/2 pint jar, I will do a 1/2 tablespoon of lemon juice. If you were doing full pint-sized jars, then you would just do a tablespoon. I like to put the lemon juice in first, just to make sure that I get this to the right headspace with the lemon juice. Get these rims cleaned off well to make sure we get a good seal. Lids. And then rings. So those 1/2 pint jars are going to process for 35 minutes. Again, you could can these in pint jars instead, and you would still process for the same amount of time. So while I'm processing that pizza sauce, I am going to blanch the beans, and I think what I'm going to do then is call it a day, because the pizza sauce ended up taking a little bit longer than I had originally anticipated to cook down, just because I'm using fresh instead of frozen tomatoes like I usually do. And the next canning recipe I have also takes a while to cook down, so I don't want to be canning really late tonight. So we're just going to get those beans done and then pick up tomorrow. So I've got a large pot of water. I'm gonna get this up to a boil, and then I'm gonna blanch these in batches, and the beans are gonna blanch for 2 minutes and then move into a cold water bath. Now that these are nice and cool, I'm just going to get them spread out on a towel to dry off a little bit before I transfer them onto a baking sheet to flash freeze. Into the freezer these go, and then in the morning I will package them up. Good morning. I am back to my preserving, and this morning I'm working on some plum sauce. So we have a couple different varieties of plum trees, and the Italian plums are almost ready. So I just went ahead and pulled any that were ripe and ready to go, and that is what I'm going to use to make a batch of plum sauce, and the rest of them we typically dehydrate. So that's my plan as they begin to ripen up. So for this recipe, I am just doing a single batch, and that should get me about 8 half-pint jars of the plum sauce. And just to speed up the process a little bit, I'm just pitting these and I'm getting them into the food processor so that I don't have to sit here finely chopping them. And that's just going to help the sauce to cook down a little bit quicker. So I've got a little bit more than half of those plums chopped. I'm just going to transfer those into my pot and then do the same for the rest of the plums as well as some onion. So I've got the rest of the plums and onions all finely chopped in the food processor. Now, usually I would have added in some garlic cloves as well, but I forgot. So I'm just going to do some garlic powder in this today and it'll turn out just fine. Now for the rest of the ingredients, I'm doing some cane sugar and then I'm also going to do a bit of brown sugar. For vinegar, I'm doing apple cider, but you could also just do white vinegar. Now for seasonings, I'm doing some dry mustard powder, some ground ginger, then a little bit of cinnamon. I tend to go light on this, and some chili flakes. Some salt, and since I left out the garlic, I'm going to do some garlic powder. So I'm just going to get this all stirred together and then get this brought up to a boil. Then I'll reduce it down to a simmer, and that's going to cook for probably about an hour, and then I'll come in with the immersion blender. So this is at about the hour mark and it has reduced down quite a bit and thickened up. I'm going to go in with my immersion blender. You could leave this chunky if you want it, but I want to have a smooth sauce. And then I'll let it cook a little bit longer until we get the right consistency. So this actually is already about at the consistency that I want. So I'm just going to leave this on low heat. I'm not really trying to reduce it anymore, but just so that some of those air bubbles can dissipate from the immersion blender. So I am getting this jarred up. I'm going to fill to 1/4 inch of headspace. And usually for this recipe, I'll get 8 half-pint jars. I'm wondering if I'm going to get a little bit less because I think I might have cooked it down a little bit longer than I normally do. So we are going to find out. Okay, it looks like I actually am going to get exactly 8 half-pints, so that's great. Just cleaning up the rims really well so I get a good seal. I made a massive mess while filling these jars, so just trying to be thorough. Adding lids and rings, and then these are ready for the canner. I believe these are going to process for 20 minutes, but I need to double check that. So those jars are processing in a water bath canner for 20 minutes. I did confirm that. And once those are out, that's gonna wrap up our preserving for the weekend. This year, preserving is definitely looking a little on the light side. It's just based on what I have time for and what I can pull out of the garden. At this point, our garden has pretty much been abandoned, so I'm just getting what I can out of there. So thank you for joining me in the kitchen for just a bit of preserving this weekend, and I will see you in the next video.